Back in 2021, I reviewed the Volvo XC40, and then in 2022 followed it up with the C40 Recharge. These have, however, been now replaced by the EX40 and EC40 models respectively. And there's also been changes since then with the battery pack configuration and also the powertrain. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, the EX40 is available in the Core, Plus and Ultra trims. You'll also find the Black Edition models. Then with the EC40, this is available from the Plus and Ultra trims only, with Black Edition models also available. Now, prices range from roughly £45,000 to £63,000, and with the EC40 starting from the Plus trim, it starts from roughly £55,000. Now, no matter which trim you go for, you'll find a 3-year warranty or 60,000 miles, whichever comes first. Now, in this review, which will be covered in such a format, I'll be seeing if these new Volvo vehicles are actually worth their price tag, and of course how they compare to some of their modern competitors. So yes, indeed, there are quite a few different variations available with the Volvo vehicles, and this will affect the battery pack configuration. First off, you've got the single motor model, which has got a 69 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that will give you roughly 300 miles of electric range, at least on the WLTP test cycle. Then you have got the single motor extended range, which has a 78 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that will give you roughly 330 to 340 miles of electric range. And then you've got the twin motor and twin motor performance models, which have got an 82 kilowatt hour battery pack, but due to the increased performance and the additional motor, this has got a slightly lower claim of roughly 320 to 330 miles. Now, it's worth pointing out over here that in the Plus and Ultra models, you'll have a heat pump that comes fitted as standard. Unfortunately, it's not available, nor available as an option in the entry-level Core trim. So therefore, it's just something worth considering, that depending on the battery pack configuration and trim level, you might not have a heat pump. Why is that important? Well, a heat pump adds to the overall efficiency of heating up the cabin, because it uses heat that dissipated from the vehicle's electronics, such as the battery pack, and safely feeds it into the cabin, adding to the overall efficiency. Now, I am actually reviewing and driving the single motor extended range with the Ultra trim, which has a 330 mile WLTP claim. Now, for my own mixed driving test, I actually netted a very impressive 260 to 280 miles. Now, as you'll be able to see from the mileage leaderboard, it does actually fare pretty well, competing with some of the longer range SUVs, although yet again over here, it is not exactly the best in its class, outranked by some of its key competitors, such as the likes of the Tesla Model Y rear-wheel drive long range, which still is the one to beat. Now, it is worth also highlighting that when I previously reviewed the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin and the C40 Recharge Twin, so yes, the twin motor configuration of both those models, I netted between 230 to 250 miles. And ironically, I would still actually expect to attain roughly 220 to 250 miles in the single motor or the twin motor configuration variants of the EX40 and the EC40. Now, aside from this, I would like to highlight that it's nice to see that you still have a one-pedal driving mode. So right now, if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal from 30 miles an hour, I'll come to a complete standstill. Now, I can actually disable this behavior by going on the infotainment system and disabling one-pedal drive. And now, if I were to speed up to 30 miles an hour, the vehicle will continue coasting. There's also an auto mode, which will effectively automatically determine when the vehicle should recoup energy back into the battery pack. Now, of course, you do also have the ability of plugging it in, and here via CCS port, the single motor model will take up to 135 kilowatts, single motor extended range 155 kilowatts, and the twin motor configuration 205 kilowatts. This means they can all go from 10 to 80% in roughly half an hour. As for its Type 2 ports, there is an 11 kilowatt onboard charger fitted as standard across the entire trim range. And therefore, if you do have access to 3-phase power supply, such as what you'll find on the public infrastructure, then you can go from 0 to 100% in 8 hours. Opt for a regular 7 kilowatt wall box like you'd find at home, then you can go from 0 to 100% in 11 to 13 hours. And via 3-pin socket, it will take you roughly 35 to 42 hours to attain the same level of charge. Now, another very important factor is your overall driving comfort, and here I do think Volvo has tuned it to perfection. See, while going around winding country routes, it does hold its own by not suffering from too much body lean. Equally, when it comes to pottering around town, it does a decent job of soaking up those anomalies, those speed bumps and those potholes. However, make no mistake, it's not got an advanced suspension system like you'd find on some alternatives, including ones that are at a cheaper price point, nor ones that have an adaptive air suspension system, which will therefore give you a really gliding feel over some of those inner city drives. Nonetheless, over here, when it comes to the overall driving experience, it's also nice to see that you have got a good sort of connection with the front axle. Make no mistake that yet again over here it's not going to compete with some more sportier electric SUVs, but here in terms of enabling the firm option via the infotainment system and going around winding country routes, I actually was left with a massive smile on my face. Yes, indeed, you've got good level of traction, including if you're going to be driving the rear-wheel drive configuration. And if you're going to opt for the all-wheel drive model, then you'll be pleased to know that you've got even better grip and better sort of control on those more challenging routes. Now, this does actually bring me on to performance, and here in the single motor model you've got a rear wheel drive configuration and therefore a motor planted on the rear axle, which combines with its battery pack to output 175 kilowatts of power or 238 horsepower. You've also got 420 newton meters of torque and a claimed 0 to 60 mile an hour time of 7.3 seconds. The extended range model, due to its slightly larger battery pack, has still got a rear-wheel drive configuration that outputs 185 kilowatts of power or 252 horsepower and 420 newton meters of torque. As for the twin motor model, you've got an all-wheel drive setup instead, which outputs a staggering 300 kilowatts of power or 408 horsepower and 670 newton meters of torque. It's claimed to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.7 seconds. The twin motor performance goes a step further by giving you 325 kilowatts or 442 horsepower and 670 newton meters of torque, and therefore shaving 0.1 seconds off the 0 to 60 mile an hour claim. Now, having tested the single motor extended range using RaceLogic Performance Box Touch, I clocked in 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2.04 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3.06 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 7.04 seconds, so yes indeed, very close to the manufacturer's claim, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 3.8 seconds. I also recorded a peak acceleration of 0.53 G. Now, no matter which model you go for, the top speed is electronically limited to 112 miles an hour, which I do appreciate will certainly suffice for the vast majority of consumers, namely if you're looking for the rear-wheel drive configuration, although for those people looking at the twin motor or the twin motor performance, one might have expected a higher top speed, but alas, that's not the case. So next up we get onto its overall interior design, and here not much has changed from the older generation model. You've got really nice upholstery and stitching work and a nice look to it. However, it would have been appreciated if there was a bit of a refreshed design, because in comparison to some of its modern competitors, I don't think it really competes with some of the premium SUVs out there. Nonetheless, it's good to see that you have got some physical buttons that are found on the steering wheel, traditional stalks, and a flurry of physical controls that are found just below the center display. Alas, over here you do not have a dedicated climate control menu, and as a result you'll have to access them via the infotainment system. They can be quickly accessed via a small little touch button that can be found towards the bottom of the screen, and yes, that can be quite cumbersome and hard to press when you're on the move. Nonetheless, the display itself is very vivid and very intuitively laid out. Furthermore, it also runs Android Automotive OS, and therefore means that it will read the state of charge of the vehicle and integrate that directly via Google Maps, making it fantastic for route planning. And yes, this is identical to what you'll find on a Tesla or indeed some of its modern competitors. It is worth saying, however, that Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are only supported over a wired connection, and yes, that is achieved via the USB Type-C port that is found by the center console. I'm not really sure why wireless support is not present, at least at the time of filming, and in comparison to its modern competitors, it does feel a little bit lackluster. Now, it is, however, great to see that you have got the full use of Google Maps directly integrated within the 12-inch display that is found behind the steering wheel. This can be, of course, customized by two different screens if you do not want a map view, but I do suspect a lot of people will actually appreciate the full integration of Google Maps because it allows you to quickly glance down at the driver's display rather than looking towards the center of the display, therefore keeping your eyes a little bit more planted on the road. On that note, it's actually very disheartening not to see a head-up display, be it as standard in the top spec trim or available as an option. Indeed, if that's something that you're really looking forward to, then you might want to look at some of the alternatives, which ironically, some of them are actually cheaper and do provide it as an option or indeed as standard. And therefore, given the overall safety credentials of a Volvo, you might have expected that to actually come featured, but alas, that's not the case. Now, what does come fitted as standard is an 8-speaker 250-watt audio system that is present in the Core and the Plus trims. However, for an additional £550 or in the Ultra trim as standard, you'll find a pretty punchy 12+1 Harman Kardon audio system that outputs 600 watts of power. It's definitely worthwhile considering upgrading to the Harman Kardon audio system if you're going for the cheaper trim levels, because it does really bolster the overall audio prowess of the vehicle. In fact, if you want a detailed breakdown of the audio system, make sure you check out my dedicated audio review that can be found up on your pop-up banner or by following the links down in the description below or the pinned comments. Now, to attain the utmost audio fidelity, you'll want to plug in the smartphone. And yes, there is a USB Type-C port that's found at the front of the center console. There's also another USB Type-C port that's used for providing charge, and this sits alongside a 12-volt socket. Now, below it, you'll also find a wireless charger that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range. Now, this does bring me on to storage. And here at the front of the center console, you've got a non-slip area. Further down, you've got 2 cup holders, and then you've also got a removal tray that can be used to expand the storage that's found underneath the center armrest. It's nice to see that you've also got a non-slip area within this compartment as well, which prevents loose change and keys from rattling about. Then you've also got the glove box, which has been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles, and you've then got pretty large front door bins, which have been lined in fabric, which is very much appreciated. This will accommodate a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium-sized valuables, and it's unsurprising over here that the rear 2 door bins are a little bit more limited. Thankfully, however, just beside the rear seat, you have got some small little storage bays, which can be handy for smaller valuables, and you've also got a pull-down armrest compartment, which reveals 2 cup holders. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, you have got its boot. And here in the EX40, you've got 410 litres to play around with, or 1,286 litres if you drop down the seats. This actually is reduced in the EC40 models to 404 litres and 1,196 litres respectively, and this is due to the sloped roofline. Now, this is actually a reduced capacity from the older generation XC40 and C40 models respectively. And I'll actually query this with Volvo UK to understand why this has actually been the case. This is actually could be due to the motor placement, which has moved from the front to the rear, although here it would actually mean that the twin motor models should actually be no different. Nonetheless, it is still actually very practical, and it will certainly suffice for your weekly shops. Furthermore, it's great to see that you've got a power tailgate that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, and this moves over to a hands-free operation in the Plus and Ultra trims. Then you've got a hatchback design with a flat loading bay and an underfloor compartment, which will not only suffice for your charging cables, but also for placing the removable boot load cover. So it's good thinking by the manufacturer. Elsewhere, you've got a ski latch and 60/40 rear split folding seats. This actually moves to power folding rear headrest in the Ultra trim. Now, it is also great to see that you have got a 31 litre front capacity, in other words, an area that's found underneath the bonnet. And this means that you can also place your charging cables over here, therefore freeing up some additional space in the boot. Then you've also got a roof load capacity of 75 kilograms and a max towing capacity for unbraked trailers at 750 kilograms. Although for brake trailers, this moves up to 1,500 to 1,800 kilograms. Moving on, we get onto seating comfort, and here it's actually quite disappointing that in the entry-level core trim, you've got manually adjustable seats only. However, in the Plus trim, this moves over to power seats, at least for the driver, with a memory function. If you want power-operated passenger seat, you'll have to go for the Ultra trim. Now, all the models have got heated front seats. However, in the Plus and the Ultra models, you have got a heated steering wheel and also rear outer heated seats as well. This can also be added to the core trim for an additional £600. Now, intriguingly, there is a fixed panoramic roof in the Plus trim within the EC40. However, in the EX40, it's only in the Ultra trim where you'll find power glass tilt and slide function with a panoramic roof. Intriguing over here because it's different between the 2 different variants of the vehicle and also depending on the trim that you go for. Now, unsurprisingly, depending on your budget, this will affect the overall aesthetics of the vehicle. And here you've got different style 19-inch alloys, although this moves over to 20-inch alloys in the Ultra. Now, the vehicle's aesthetics itself are actually very stylish. It hasn't very much changed from the older generation model, although at the front you've got a little bit more of a unison type of look. Towards the side, you haven't got body-colored wheel arches or side skirts, but given they're quite minimal and don't protrude too much from the vehicle's shell, it actually does look the part. Furthermore, at the rear, you've got very much Volvo's DNA through and through, thanks to the tail light design and the integrated spoiler. Frankly, over here, when it comes to its exterior look, I've got no complaints. And of course, it's available in a few different color finishes as well. Now, what might be of even greater importance are the overall safety credentials. And yes, indeed, this might be one of the top priorities while considering a Volvo vehicle in the first place. Now here, the C40 Recharge was tested by Euro NCAP in 2022. And it's actually been updated to reflect the EC40 model, so therefore the rating is still very much valid. One can also imagine the safety scores will also apply to the EX40 as well. Here it scored 5 out of 5 stars, scoring 92% in adult occupancy, 89% in child occupancy, and 89% in its safety assist scores. Now, as for the driver assistance systems, as standard across the entire trim range, you've got cruise control, driver alert system, lane keeping aid, lane departure warning, oncoming lane mitigation, road sign information display, and city safety with steering support. Now, in the Plus and Ultra trims, you have got Pilot Assist, which effectively gives you steering support on the motorway. This works in conjunction with Adaptive Cruise Control, which actually does work a treat of keeping you at a safe distance from the leading vehicle without feeling too jerky either. You'd also have got blind spot assistance, cross traffic alert, and rear cross traffic warning with mitigation. Now, this can also be added to the core trim for roughly £550 to £1,500, depending on if you want Pilot Assist with Adaptive Cruise Control. Now, I should point out that all these driver assistance systems will become re-enabled every single time you power on the vehicle. And thankfully, Volvo has somewhat thought about it, because the likes of the road sign information display and therefore warning can actually be quickly disabled by pressing the left arrow button that's found on the steering wheel, and no, not the media control button. Unfortunately, over here, when it comes to the lane keeping aid, this, however, has to be done via the infotainment system. It would have been further appreciated if there was a button on the steering wheel or indeed the stalks that one could press or indeed hold down in order to disable such a function. This is very much important for those people who live near country roads, because sometimes the vehicle will actually sway you in an incorrect way, therefore leading to an even more unsafe driving experience. Now, to conclude, I would like to talk about parking and visibility. And here you have got an 11.4 meter turning circle, therefore making it actually very easy to maneuver. But it's not exactly got the tightest turning circle out there on the market. Nonetheless, visibility at the front, side and rear are absolutely excellent. This is due to wide openings and relatively small A-pillars, therefore making it very easy to peer around corners. Furthermore, you've got rear parking sensors and a rear view camera that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range. However, if you want front sensors, you'll have to go for the Plus trim, but this can be added for an additional £350 in the core model. And if you want 360-degree high-resolution cameras, you'll have to go for the Ultra trim. This can be added to the core and Plus models for an additional £550. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict of the Volvo EX40 and EC40 models. Now, in comparison to when I reviewed the XC40 in 2021 and the C40 Recharge in 2022, I do think there are plenty more alternatives that you might want to consider, some of which I've reviewed will be down in the description below. However, I do still think that Volvo have provided you a pretty comprehensive package. You've got pretty nice driving dynamics, be it if you go for the rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive configuration, a decent electric range, at least if you go for the single motor extended range, and then you've also got nice use of technology within the cabin, and it goes without saying one of the key selling points are the driver assistance systems and the overall safety credentials of owning a Volvo. However, it would have been nice if the manufacturer had further optimized the battery, given you a refreshed interior design, better rear occupancy space, specifically with the removal of the transmission tunnel, which is not really needed in a fully electric vehicle, and potentially even better boot capacity. Now, I'd be curious to know if you would still pick the Volvo, given its overall price point, down in the comment section below, and how you feel it compares to some of its modern competitors. Now, if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.